as well. So we have a three-part sort of presentation today. The first part is how a bill becomes a law. The second part is how to oppose or support a bill. And then the third part is the spring legislative update. So I'm going to break it up into three parts. If you have questions about that part, please feel free to type them in whenever you want, and I'll periodically look at the chat box for it. All right, let me just take care of that. Okay, so how a bill becomes a law, the life cycle of legislation in California. All right, so we have three parts of the branches of government in the state. This sort of presentation is going to be state-based for the most part. It's because of that, we don't want to get into the federal. We don't have that much say in federal legislation. Of course, you have all 50 states opposed to just one state. So most of the laws and items that we can cover will typically be in the state portion. So the executive branch is the governor and all of the elected officials, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, etc. So you vote directly for them statewide. Legislative has two houses. We have the state senate, which is 40 members. Think of it as your nationally senate. So there's less per capita. And then your state assembly, think of that as Congress, and that's 80 members. And then finally, just like the federal government, we have a judicial branch, which is the state Supreme Court and then the lower courts. So what do we do with all those branches? Well, just like the federal government, each branch is responsible for sort of their own enacting. The judicial branch takes care of the laws that are already in place and enforcing them and interpreting them. And then, of course, if it has to go past the state Supreme Court, then it will go to the federal Supreme Court and work its way through that system and eventually end up there. Legislative branch writes the laws. So those are your senators and assembly people. Whoever you contact, if you have a senator or assembly member that you know, they both pretty much do the same thing, just like in Congress. They have to go through both houses to pass a bill, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And of course, your executive branch, your governor, he signs the bill. He can do executive orders, but it's not super common. In the federal government, in the last few presidential administrations, executive orders have been more and more common. Before probably the year 2000, they weren't very common at all. So, and we're seeing it a lot more the further out we go into our federal presidential election. We keep seeing more and more executive orders. So who knows what will happen 20 years from now. All right. So let's talk about the idea, right? So all of legislation comes from an idea, right? So that idea can come from anybody, right? It can come from the elected. It can come from you at CMRTA. It can come from you as an individual. You know, if Rosa Rosales has an idea and she says, Rosa, I want to talk to my local elected and get this idea through, it can be her. If Rosa is representing CMRTA, then she has a bigger collective behind her as well. And she's going to be doing it most likely on a municipal or a local government type idea. So we persuade a legislator, okay, right? So that's the next step in the process. The state legislatures are limited to 40 bills per 2-year session, and that's per person, right? So you can't have one with 200 bills because, I mean, nothing gets done now. Nothing will never get done if we have more than that, right? So some people have less, some people have more. California right now is pretty much a one-party state for elected official-wise. So when I say one-party state, meaning that one party has control of the branches, right? So they have control of the Senate, they have control of the Assembly, and they have control of the executive branch. There isn't a statewide elected official that's Republican currently. In the past, there's usually a mix here and there. Of course, you can remember the last Republican governor was Arnold Schwarzenegger. But since then, we had Jerry Brown for a couple of terms, and now Gavin Newsom. So the legislator will act as an author and deliver the idea to the legislative council. So the Leg Council is the short name for it. They're sort of a bunch of lawyers and clerks and they put those ideas into language for the bill. Once that happens, it goes to the chief clerk, who gives the bill a number, and then it gets introduced. You can see that little chart on the bottom there. All right, so we've probably seen, or heard the videos of how a bill becomes a law, like Schoolhouse Rock and things like that. That's typically going to be your federal government. It's a little expensive for them to do one for every state, but for the most part, California follows the exact same thing. Bills introduced, as I mentioned, goes through the committee hearings, and then it has to go through both the Assembly and the Senate, the opposite houses of origin, after it passes their current house. And as we mentioned, and as you know, in your past dealings with CMRTA and many laws that we have, most bills become law January 1st of the following year. So it seems in the last 5 or 6 years that the state likes to pass laws in California that affect local municipalities, especially business licensing. So I would say 85% of the municipalities in California are a financial based or a fiduciary based collection of business licensing, not regulatory based. There are regulatory based cities in there as well too, and counties. However, most of them are collecting it simply to collect revenue, not as a regulation or regulatory aspect. However, the state thinks that everybody's regulatory. They don't ever talk to us when they want to pass a bill. I mean, when's the last time anybody reached out to your city or your county and said, hey, we have a bill coming down. What do you guys think about it? It's at the statewide level. Probably rare occasion, right? So they don't really understand the full aspect of what we do every day. So most of our laws are not necessarily affecting us, but meaning regulatory, but the state imposes regulations. So therefore, we're becoming more and more regulatory. All right, so the first reading. What does the first reading really mean? Well, the clerk reads the bill number, who the author was, so whoever supported the bill, the assembly person or the senator, and the descriptive title on the floor. And then the bill is sent to be printed. It has to be out there for 30 days, just like when you guys post an ordinance at City Hall for a new a sort of resolution, whether you're passing a new cannabis law or adding a 1-cent sales tax or something like that. You have to print it for public review. And then, except for those three sort of committees, mainly because emergency and you see extraordinary, that's like for COVID relief. If there's fires, we had that a couple years ago. Those emergency bills, because there's no time to wait for that 30 days, people need assistance or people need this law ASAP. They're not going to wait for that period. The bill gets sent to the committee, so after that 30 days lapses. And then once it goes into the committee, it goes to the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee is where it's assigned to a more specific policy committee, right? So I have a listing of all of the committees on the bottom of this slide here. There's a whole bunch of different ones, and each assembly member or senator is assigned to a few committees, usually based on their prior background, right? So when I worked in the state legislature, the assemblyman that I worked for was a teacher. And so he was on the education committee, and he was also on some other committees dealing with, some sort of items that he did. I think he was on the government organization and housing as well, just because he represented the county that I worked for. And of course, if you're mainly, if let's say that your elected official had background, maybe they were like a community organizer or involved in the union, they'd probably be on the public employment and retirement or the labor committee. That maybe they served the military, they'd be on Veterans Affairs, something like that. So then that committee will act on the bill. So they can pass the bill out of the committee. They can defeat the bill, and then it just stops right there. Or what we call dies. The bill dies because it just sits there and nobody takes it up. The committee chair says, I don't really want to deal with this. It could be political reasons they don't want to deal with it, or it could be, like a reasoning, maybe they feel that they want to tweak it. Just saying things that happen when one party states happen to take control wherever you are in the United States. Typically, if the opposite, the minority party, has an idea that's really, really good, what we see often is the majority party, if they have full control, like California, will take that idea, sort of what we call kill the bill, rewrite it, change a couple things, and call it their own, and then claim a victory for that bill. It's politics, it's what happens, but it's just interesting to see a lot of that and how it works in California. So if you're in a minority and you have a great idea and your bill actually gets through, you were lucky, because usually they kill it and then they rewrite it and make it their own. All right, let me move on to the next one. So after that first hearing, we go to a second hearing. So the bill is read for a second time on the floor. All right, so it's out there on the floor now. And so of that same house of origin, meaning if you were an assembly person and you were the author of the bill, now it's going to your assembly floor. It's not going to the Senate yet. So if the bill is passed without amendments, it waits for a third reading, and then it'll move to the next house. If the bill needs amendments, it goes back to the committee for approval, and the reading repeats. So that same process happens over again. You'll see a strikeout type for any language. If you happen to go and look at LegInfo, which is the website that has a lot of the bill information, you will see a ton of strikeout, a ton of red sort of text, or italics of updated language. And the third hearing, right? So we talked about this. After it passes the second, everything's good. It goes to the third. Now the author has a chance to explain the bill on the floor. Testimony sometimes is often, being able to be done by the public for the third reading too. And then here's some numbers on what's needed for approval. So Assembly needs 41 votes because there's 80 in the Assembly. That's a standard bill. And if it's a money-related bill, something like taxes, things like that, it's 54 votes. It needs 2/3. Senate is the same way. It needs 21 votes for a standard bill, or 27. And that's just because we don't want whoever the party in charge is to be, raising taxes or cutting substantial taxes and programs without the majority of, or 2/3 of the majority of the electeds agreeing to it. So once it approves, it goes to the opposite house, meaning wherever it landed, it goes to the opposite, Assembly to Senate, Senate to Assembly. And then if the bill is approved by both houses, it goes to the governor to sign again. So what does the governor do? Well, the governor has 3 choices on the bill. They can sign the bill into law. Usually that brings a big press conference. All of the, the reporters are out there, maybe people that are benefiting from the bill. If it's a bill for supporting unions, then maybe, the local union workers will be there. If it's a bill supporting teachers, maybe the teachers will be there, healthcare workers, etc. I remember there was a bill on Title IX exemptions, and they had a lot of female sports athletes there for that, and that happened when I was up in the legislature. The second part of it is it can be just signed into law without the signature. So that means that you don't have to have the big ceremony. It just gets signed into law. That's called chaptering. So chaptering is just, okay, great, it looks good. We're gonna the governor's not gonna touch it. It'll automatically turn into law. The third part is a veto. Veto is gonna be the governor saying, no, we do not want this bill. Governor Newsom hasn't put too many vetoes on. When he ran for office the first time around, he sort of came in with, hey, if you elect me, I'll support your decision, state legislature, because we're of the same working party. Where Jerry Brown was kind of a rogue guy, and he would veto a lot of the spending bills. He wanted to really balance the budget in California. where since Jerry Brown's been out, we're having to borrow a lot from the federal government, and our budget happens to be mainly based and waiting for federal government assistance for revenue related activities. So each governor is different, how they operate. I mean, and even two in the exact same party operated totally different. So the governor has those 30 days to make a decision. So that's why they usually, those decisions are usually done in the fall. So that way by January 1, the bill could be enacted, right? So if the governor signs it within 30 days, great, it's signed, it'll be good on January 1st. If he vetoes it or she vetoes it, if we get a female governor at some point, then it'll be vetoed, the bill dies right there. But if those 30 days pass, then the bill gets chaptered. Rare occasion, a governor's veto can be overridden by a 2/3 vote in both the Assembly and the Senate. I haven't seen one in a while, but like I said, rare occasion, it does happen. So after it gets signed, Secretary of State has to officially sign it, dates it, and it becomes law. All right. So here's our legislative calendar. Pretty much, I tweaked it a little bit to match up this year. This year is a tad different too, because we're still with COVID restrictions. Last year, this calendar was thrown completely out the window. But hopefully next year it'll be back around where it was originally. So January 1st, as mentioned, most new state laws take effect. Legislature reconvenes after like a Christmas and New Year's sort of recess, the first Monday in January, if it's not July or January 1st. And then the budget submitted to the governor on January 10th. The budget is usually, critiqued galore, and then divvied up to move forward as the year comes on. So bills can be introduced later on. Policy committee deadlines, we're in committee right now. So we passed that February date for the bills to be introduced. So I mentioned each person gets 40 bills. Well, what also happens is you have what's called placeholder bills. So you can have placeholder bills that somebody just puts in there. They're given a bill number. They're given a bill sort of like code, whether it's taxation or public health or appropriations, things like that, right? So they're given that, and it's just a blank sort of filler. So if somebody has an idea later on through the session and wants to pass something quickly, there you don't have to go through that process again. The bill placeholder is already there. Just insert the language, it goes to the committee, and the clock starts. So there's a bunch of placeholders in there right now as well. So what's coming up? June 4th, this year is the last day for the House to pass bills introduced in that House. Meaning if you're an assembly person, the last day for you to get a bill out of your house is June 4th. If it's still sitting in there, it's not going to, for the most part, pass this year. Various summer dates. There are deadlines for bills, and we have summer recess as well. That's about a month, especially during campaign season. A lot of the local electeds will go out and campaign for that month in their district. And then September is when all of the moving and shaking happens. And of course, the last day for a bill to be passed, as I mentioned, is in the fall. It's the second Friday in September. And then from that point, that 30 days kicks in for the governor to sign, veto, or chapter it. So here's a big sort of blurry sheet on the life cycle of a bill. I have a couple of these still left over. If we ever get a chance to come in person again and you'd like one, just send me an email. I have a couple of the hard copies of that from my days at the legislature. But you can see it's very convoluted. So nothing is easy in the world of government, as you know. So at least there's a flow chart to help things get along. All right. So if you have any questions, once again, please feel free to add them in the chat box in the presentation. I'm going to start moving on to part 2. But if you have questions from part 1, I can still address those as well. And feel free as we come along through the presentation to make sure that if you have a question, add it to the chat box, and I will get to it at some point. All right. how to support or oppose a bill. So let's talk about how we're going to do an overview of this. Well, as I mentioned in the last part, if you have an idea, that's where it starts, right? So what is your idea? Who does it benefit? How does it benefit? Maybe your local municipality is encountering an issue that needs more than just your city council or board of supervisors, right? So if you're seeing, if you have an idea, you're probably not the only one. If your city's going through it, your county's going through it, there's probably somebody else in the same boat as you. So what happens? Well, that's a great impact for CMRTA to assist, because we are here as a behalf of the state, local municipalities. Maybe there's a bill in the current cycle that your municipality opposes, right? So perhaps, let's say, a bill we all know from last year. We have AB 5. So we knew what a mess that bill was. It passed without much debate on the floor, pretty much just went in there quickly. And then we found out, oh man, this is a mess of a bill. So they had to go in and put auxiliary bills into AB 5 to exempt additional sort of industries from being a independent contractor versus an employee. So things like that, if we have opposition on a bill, and I'm going to get to some of those bills in a little bit of what's coming down, maybe it's something that your city or county might want to oppose. And how do you deal with that opposition? You just send them a letter to the bill author or to the state legislature, and they'll pick it up and put them on the opposition. Or you contact CMRTA, you contact the League of Cities, things like that, or the League of Counties. So you can write an opposition letter both as an individual or municipality or your organization. So once again, I'm going to use Rosa as an example. Rosa works for the city of San Diego. If the city of San Diego is, voicing opposition against a bill, they have a city attorney that, I think I have some examples, that will send letters to the bill author and CC other people on it and voice their opposition on the bill. But if Rosa, as an individual, she says, I don't like this bill personally, she can also do the same thing. Of course, when you're representing the city or an organization, then you have to have the majority of that, whether it's council, board of supervisors, the organizational board has to be behind you. You can't just say that you're representing them and they do it. I mean, you probably get fired for doing something like that. But let's move forward. Okay, so turning your idea into law, right? So get to know your legislators. Do you know who your local electeds are? I mean, if you're voting for them, I would hope that you at least know who they are, their names, perhaps their party. The party's probably aligned with the party that you're in, unless California's a little different, because you can run two of the same party in a runoff election, in a general election. But you can still get to them directly, even with COVID restrictions. So all you have to do is reach out to them via email, via phone call. I think their offices are still closed, but when I used to work there, we had people that would show up to the office every once in a while, send us emails, call us. We had our regulars, like I'm sure you guys do at the city or county, that call you every day or come in person and voice their concerns or complaints. You can do the same thing with your local legislatures. And they can do a lot more than just bill and legislation things too. They can also help you with sort of EDD things, any statewide sort of initiatives or programs they can assist with, or they can tell you how better to assist with. Just like Congress can help you if you're looking to join the military and go to a university. Maybe you want to tour the Capitol or White House. I'm not sure. You probably can't do that right now. But in the past, you were able to do that. So, but when you go in there, you want to be prepared and do your homework, right? You want to know the ins and outs of your bill. You want to plan out how to resolve the problem, who will be in opposition, and how you can be responsible for that. So as an example, when I was at the legislature, I worked for an assemblyman. The assemblyman was of one particular party. We have many parties in the United States, but for the most part, there are mainly two parties that run the country at one point or another. Um, for now, I mean, there's been Whig and other things back there, but of those two parties, you really have to understand the opposition party to really get a better view and aspect on what they're looking for, right? So if you have an idea and you think this is a great idea, you should think about it and be, hey, what would the other side think of my idea? Is it something that couldn't pass? Is it something that they would just shut down? Make sure to think through things. All right, so you want to gather support. As I mentioned, gain other municipalities or organizations on your behalf. CMRTA, the League of Cities, League of Counties, any sort of statewide, the CSMFO. The more people that get involved in addressing these issues, the better. If you just have one person, yeah, you have a voice, but is your voice really going to get the, support if Rosa as herself happens to voice opposition for a bill? Or will CMRTA or CSMFO, the league, be a lot better? Probably so. The league would be better, but we still want to hear from Rosa. So the more the merrier on that part. And then we have to find a legislator to take up your bill. Usually it's going to be a legislator in your district if we're talking about a local agency, whether it's your local assembly person, your local state senator, for the most part like that. If you're a statewide bill, you maybe if it fails there and you have some friend or some other organization that wants to take it up somewhere else, great, you can do it that way. So each legislator, as mentioned before, serves on different committees. So maybe you don't want to reach out to that teacher that got elected if you have a bill on local government, but maybe you want to reach out to the lawyer that got elected instead, or the finance professional or businessman that got elected. They might understand finance better than the teacher. Not saying the teacher doesn't, but their area of expertise could be different, and the committees that they serve on could also be different. Voicing your support. So I have an example here. Most of us know, hopefully we all know, what SB 205 is. SB 205 is the Stormwater Resources Bill. So just wanting to talk about what's happening here, right? So most bills get passed without much consulting of local municipalities. So we mentioned that, right? SB 205, they never talked to the local agencies. Heck, they didn't even talk to the State Stormwater Resources Board when this bill came through. I was on several meetings sitting with the State Stormwater Resources Board prior to January 1 when this took effect. And we're sitting there, we're like, what happened? Did they ask you? No, they never asked us. Did they ask the cities? No, they never asked the cities. So by the time they reached out to the State Stormwater Board, it was too late. The bill was already passed through one house, and nobody's going to oppose a bill on environmental protections. So yes, the idea is great, but the implementation of the bill was not very good. So that's part of the problems, right? As I call it, the feel-good bill. There was no opposition votes because who's going to say no to a bill to help protect, the runoff? Yeah, if you do that, you're going to have all the environmental, sort of activist groups come after you. You might have your local, sort of constituents come after you saying you're pro-pollution, things like that. So what the authors should have done was reach out to the State Stormwater Resources Board and local municipalities to see how the bill would be directly affecting licenses. Why is it business licenses? It makes no sense. It should be done through public works. It should be done through a permit or something on that end. The state, like I said, has no idea how we operate at the local level. So it's just, if we had opposition against this bill, we might have been able to catch some of these things and have a little less confusion on the implementation part of it. All right, so how do we act on this bill? Well, we have to write a letter, okay? I mean, a letter could be email as well too. So both supporting and opposing sort of opposition letters can be written, as I mentioned, by anyone. Um, as we talked about, individuals carry less weight, but a bigger organization has more. City attorney is probably the best person for your local agency to do it. I know when I worked at the city side of things, I would often pass or write agenda items for a resolution that city council would pass. We would take that resolution, the city clerk would send copies to the legislature, the governor, things like that. So see if your city has done that. Most cities have at some point. If you haven't been involved in doing it, somebody there does know they've done it before, and see if you guys can outly and speak out and speak openly about the support or opposition of bills. You can go both ways, right? Supporting a bill could be great. It could help local government, or it could tie the hands like SB 205 and make it more restrictive and procedural and regulatory that most local government agencies don't have currently. Second part, I would call or schedule a meeting. We probably can't meet in person, like I said, but calls might work or Zoom might work. That may change forever now. It used to be we would meet, somebody would come by. If the elected official wasn't there that day, they would speak to myself or somebody else at the office. However, now they can probably just do it on Zoom. You might be able, they could be in Sacramento and you can be in Los Angeles and be doing the same thing and talking to each other opposed to meeting face to face. So we do have that now, and that's helped a lot. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work. All right, so this is an example of a letter. It's a little hard to see, but we're not looking for content right here, of the city of San Diego, right? So San Diego has an attorney. It looks like Mara Elliott is the attorney at San Diego. And Mara has voiced an opposition on a bill. It looks like this is SB 1049. It talks about local agencies and short-term rentals. So they are actually supporting this bill, it looks like. So this is a good one, apparently. It happened last year, and I'm not sure if it ended up going into effect, but it was supported. Here's another one. This happened to be from, I looked at the League of Cities, right? This was back when we were talking about the massage bill, AB 1147 for CamTech and things like that, when the state was trying to take over the regulatory portion of massage businesses, and the local governments took power, which was a great thing. So this was a bill for that. So another bill in support, as you can see in that section there. So this is an outline of a bill. You can see a bunch of these outlines at the League of California Cities as well, if you want to look at an example. And they will be able to, you can send this on your city's behalf and send it to the League, and the League will put it all together and sort of have their lobbyists give it over to Sacramento. All right, so once again, time to bring up any questions. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box below. All right. So we do have this sort of presentation going until about 10:30, but if we finish early, great. That'll be better. We're at about 9:45 right now, so we have some time. So this is what's going on currently in the local legislature, important bills. All right, so I'm going to start with business licensing, since most people here are responsible for that or deal to some extent with that. So we have two really concerning bills for business licensing. One is actually, they both might not be moving forward after all, but they're still important to look at and keep an eye on in case they pull a quick one on us. So the first one is 1181, which would prohibit cities and counties, including charter cities and counties, from imposing license fees from restaurants from July 1 until December 2021. So essentially, this would say we can't collect business license fees for restaurants only, I mean, probably bars as well, for 2 years. Well, 1 year is already passed, and the next year we're already a quarter of the way through. So what would happen? You'd have to refund any licenses collected during that period. So that's gonna be money out of your budget that you've already allocated and collected. So, that's kind of going to be issuing a lot of refunds. Hopefully, your local agency has it on your business type down to a restaurant or a bar or something like that. But what if they do both, right? What if they're a grocery store like Whole Foods that has restaurants inside? How does that work? Do you call it a grocery store? Do you call it a restaurant? I mean, it's so this bill looks like it's not going to be moving forward. Hopefully that's the case, but it's still alive per se. We do have a couple questions, so I'm going to go ahead and address that. We have Roland from the city of Marietta. What is the link to the legislature to track the status of legislation? Leg info is the link. I don't have it top of my head, but if you Google it, California Leg, L-E-G, info, that is, you can Google it. Should be one of the first 1 or 2 searches on there for that. And you can see the full text of the bill. It's a great website. They're able to show you the outline of the bill. Thank you, Natasha. I'm going to post it in the chat for everyone. Tasha just sent it over to me. All right, so that's a great spot to see the full text of the bill. You can see bill analysis, and the bill analysis changes from time to time as well, based on the language of the bill and how that gets amended. You can see the history of the bill. So where the bill is at, what committee is it in? Is it passed in the committee? Is it just, withheld is a good one, meaning that it's probably going to die in that committee type thing. Another question that came in, our business license is a tax. Does it have to be refunded? That is a great question. And that's part of the reasoning why hopefully you've learned from the presentation so far that the state legislature has no idea what they're doing really when it comes to local government and tax and fee collection. They don't ask us. They just pass laws because they think it's great, or they get, lobbied from a certain, whether organization or constituents or a big campaign donor to pass a bill or to put a bill up. So this would be refunded. Most likely the state, it says fees, but the state doesn't know what fees and taxes, what the difference is. So clarity is never a good thing, as we know from many bills like 205 and AB 2184 and things like that. So hopefully this bill does not move forward, so we don't have to worry about it. But if things do move forward for potential bills, this is a reason why we need to sort of voice opposition if we are not in favor of things like this. Good question. All right, so the second bill that I was mentioning is SB 49, right? So this bill has sort of changed throughout when it got started. I think if those of you were on a couple calls for other organizations or even this one in the early part of the year, I discussed this briefly and just had it on your forecast. It's another scary one for us. It would say certain businesses would be exempting from taxable years starting, so this is in the future, next January, all the way through 2026, if financial hardship occurs. Well, it doesn't necessarily define financial hardship. What can that be? It could be COVID. It could be a fire like we had in the past. We really don't understand a full outline of it. So that's one of the problems of this bill. The next one is it has to meet certain criteria that the taxpayer temporarily closed or ceased operations, right? So what sort of criteria? It says emergency order, but there's no defined criteria. Once again, another loophole in the bill. The bill would designate the credit allowed under provisions for the California fees and tax credit. Okay, great. So this next one is an important one. It defines eligible costs for the purposes of fees as defined paid to an agency with a permit, license, mandatory, or cost imposed by the state or local government during the time. So this would be that all-encompassing tax or fee. What do you collect? This pretty much says everything. So of course, $4 is part of that SB fee, the $4 fee. If you're not collecting or you're not charging the your local fee, definitely don't collect that $4 fee. Why should the state get money if they're taking away money from you? So that's a fee as well. So, but this is mainly for now. It changed. It's affecting state licenses like barbering, cosmetology, real estate, etc. But keep an eye on it because it might change again. So this bill's already changed once, but keep an eye. This is one definitely, if it moves, CMRTA should be doing something for it, or the League of Cities, because this is going to be taking a lot of revenue out of cities, especially if you're in a city, let's say that, got hit hard by some sort of, fiscal emergency or even a physical emergency. All right. So back to a more happy bill or happy subject. We're going to call this off-site alcohol sales. So if you have been to various restaurants throughout the last year, most of them have been closed, but you can do to-go orders. The local health agencies started allowing off-site consumption of alcohol, meaning that you can go in, you can buy a margarita, they'll put it in a cup for you, or a beer, or whatever. I mean, if it's a beer, usually you aren't going to do it, but a mixed drink was typically what I saw. And they'll put it in a cup, they'll put a sticker on it, they'll seal it, they'll shrink wrap it, whatever they do, and they call that, pre-packed sealed containers. This will make that temporary allowance by local health departments permanent statewide. So I think this is a good thing. I mean, I didn't see a high increase in DUIs because of it. It's still going to be a DUI if you tamper with it. People were a lot less on the road too during the last year, so that could have something to do with it. But I think it's a good bill to help recover a lot of our restaurants and gain some extra revenue on that aspect if you want to get something to go as the to-go trend, or those delivery vehicles, your Grubhub, your Postmates, things like that. All right, we have sales tax. This is on pawnbrokers. So the current law excludes the transfer of property by a pawnbroker who pledged the property for a loan. So pretty much sale and purchase. It's not the tax. So you're not taxed if you have a loan when you reclaim the property back. So you're not taxed on it because it was yours and it's your loan. This would just extend the current bill. It's already in place. So let's say that I have, I don't know, I'm wanting to pawn off an old gun. I have an old gun from, I don't know, the Civil War days. That's a historical gun and it's worth thousands of dollars. And I want to pawn this gun to the local pawn to get some quick cash and in return, pay back that loan. If I pay back the loan, the pawnbroker, when he gives the gun back to me, doesn't charge sales tax because it was mine. I had it, I'm just paying back the loan. It's collateral for that loan. If this law doesn't pass, then starting January 1, the sunset bill would start charging sales tax on that payback of the loan and what they were charging it if you would have bought it back. So this bill is probably going to pass. It's just a sunset bill. We've seen most of the sunset bills continue on for another 5 years. So just FYI for those of you that have pawnbrokers in your agency. All right, medical exemptions. So this is a sales tax bill. It's starting January 1 for 5 years. Exempt the gross receipts for the storage, use, consumption of any reagents or chemicals and lab equipment supplies used by a licensed blood bank to perform blood screening tests on human blood. Makes sense. Totally understand why that is there. It's health related. I don't know who's selling blood on the black market. If that's a thing, I mean, it could be for all I know, but this bill makes sense. We'll see if it's going to talk about anything, but I don't know. There is a question. Do you have updates on SB 219? I do not. That wasn't in my presentation. But you can look on the Leg info page and definitely see what's going on there. All right. We have a TOT one. Oh, it looks like I forgot one of the bills up there. I think it's an SB. McGuire, I think, is a senator. And this bill switched houses. I'm not sure. Let me see. 555. It is a Senate bill, which this bill is really scary, by the way. This is a red flag bill for everybody here listening that has short-term rentals and TOT. Very important bill. We are concerned at HDL. We are also concerned for all of the agencies that are represented in CMRTA. So keep an eye on this one. If you need to voice opposition, this is the one to do. It authorizes a local agency to allow the CDTFA to collect any TOT tax from STRs. So other states have already passed this bill. I know the state of Oregon. I've dealt with a couple people up there in various cities, and the state has passed something similar where the state will be collecting the STR funds. They'll be managing the TOT for that. So CDTFA will take care of registration, tax collection, and all the whatnot, and remit the taxes back to local agencies. They will also administer a fee. They want their own cut for admin purposes. So if you're managing it in-house, all of that money goes to you. If you have all of the authorization, you have all of the ability to collect the fees, to monitor, to enforce, to audit, guess what? If the CDTFA does it, you are not going to be able to do it. So just like that Airbnb sort of contract, right? Corinne, that's a good question. Is it an opt-in bill? I believe right now it is an opt-in bill. However, there is discussion it's going to be a total collection for it because other states, it is one or the other as well. So it is a scary bill. I would say to you, if you want local control, be aware of this one. The bill will define a short-term rental. Of course, we all know what that is, with a period of 30 days or less. So once again, keep an eye on this one, SB 555. Shelley, good question, and I like that question. Can you charge a processing fee to collect back the portion of the CDTFA? I don't know. I haven't looked for that in the bill yet. I would say no. If the bill does not state it, probably not, because usually the bill will tell you if you can collect that fee back or charge for that portion. So the cities would essentially lose an administrative fee if the CDTFA collects it. They haven't stated what the fee is yet as well, but it has passed the Senate and it's in the Assembly now. So red flag, it's moving. Another question in here, if the municipality does not impose a tax on short-term rentals, will the state start collecting a tax? Probably not, because it's still local control for that. If you don't have a tax for it, then there's no way for the state to know what tax will be submitted. So I think you'll be okay on that end. But yeah, this is, if you're to take anything away from today's presentation, this is the bill, SB 555. It's passed the Senate it's in the next house in the assembly, meaning it's moving and moving quickly. Other bills are still in the same house. This was already passed out. Hopefully they answered everybody's questions that come through the chat. All right, AB 964. Luckily, this one's still in the same one, but this one is an okay one. For those of you that are beach type cities, this would actually probably benefit you a little more. I know San Diego and some San Diego area cities have had some dealings with this in the last couple of years, especially with the state and trying to pass their own sort of statewide ordinance to allow it. The issue really is the California Coastal Act those agencies that monitor the coast can typically tell a city, no, we're gonna, if it's a property that is on the beach or has beach access, they are in charge of it. The city's laws and the city's ordinances are not really in control. The Coastal Commission can manage it and regulate it. And if the city allows for STRs and the Coastal Commission says, no, not here, then that's the law. Or vice versa. If the Coastal Commission says, yeah, we're going to allow for STRs here, and the city says, no, we don't want it in the city, it's tough, it's too bad. This law will allow the city to regulate those sort of beachfront properties through a hosting platform. So mainly if you're a beach city, this will concern you. If you are not on a beach, well, if you want to go stay somewhere, great, but it won't really affect you otherwise. All right, another short-term rental one. SB 60 is involving fines. This just raises the fines. So currently, you probably have your typical fine through your local citation, which is 100, 200, 500. This is about the standard one if you write a citation. This can actually increase those fines for violations for STRs to 1,500, 3,000, and 5,000, all within a year. For those of you that do write citations, hopefully you are following this. I know I wrote many hundreds in my days, and if not thousands. And we have to monitor when you first write your last citation or how many have been written in that period. If you write a citation January 1 of 2020, that's already expired by now. So you can throw that one out. So it has to be in that same year. If you're now writing your second citation this year or in the last year, maybe you wrote one in June and now you're writing one now, you'll be under the 2 citation law, not 3 if you wrote that one in January, because it's already been over a year since that first one came into effect. So once again, in the same year, the year can be any point. For me, the year starts from the point of when you issued that last citation and just go backwards from there, right? So if you issued one in January of last year, sorry, too bad. If you issue one in June, that one counts as the year. That'll start from that first year on out. All right, here's a miscellaneous one. I know Division 3 talked about this in their presentation, but this is a gender neutral retail section. It doesn't really affect us per se. We're not going to have to enforce it. The state enforces it, but you will see it in your local retail units. So larger retail stores of 500 or more. So they haven't defined 500 or more, I think, meaning if it's statewide, if it's in a store. I want to say it's probably statewide, but for the most part, I would think this would cover Target, Walmart, Kohl's, I guess Best Buy, but you don't really have gender neutral things or one sex versus the other there. But clothing for the most part is what it is. This is a big topic all over the United States right now. Gender neutrality. We had a bill last year get passed for gender neutral cost measures, not necessarily a section or who you want to call, what sort of sex or gender you want to call somebody, but this was more on cost, keeping the cost the same, and that we all addressed last year, and should be on your your license certificates or somewhere when you address the public for certain industries like dry cleaners and barbershops and things like that. This is mainly going to be retail. So clothing, toys, childcare items. I mean, I guess the positive side of it, if you're not a big fan, is it does create a new market for those entrepreneurs or those businesses that manufacture clothing, toys, and childcare items um, to market to this new group. I don't know how big the section is going to be. Doesn't really state it or where it's going to be at. And it's mainly childcare. So just keep an eye on it. It'll probably pass. I think we have some strong support from various organizations for this, and you'll have opposition from the retail big box giants as well, I would think, but maybe not, because it's like I said, it's a new opportunity for them to sort of carve out a section for new clothing and toys and things. All right, so that pretty much wraps it up. If you do have a question in the chat, feel free to go ahead and type it in. You have one last opportunity for that. If you are looking for more information on the bills or the copy of the presentation or find more, you can contact me. As Rosa and Caesar mentioned, this will also be on the CMRTA website. So if you are a CMRTA member, you have access to all of our free webinars that we've had throughout last year and this year. Gosh, I think we're up to about 10 plus now for Division 4. So there are a plethora of them on there, especially if you want those CRO codes. Those are really important if you want to become a CRO or renew. I know I just renewed mine. It's been a few years. So it's a great thing to have if you haven't been a CRO. If you do have any questions, you can contact our CRO state rep, which is Wendy Anderson. Her information is also on the CMRTA website as well. Once again, any last questions, feel free to post in the chat. I'll give it a couple more minutes. And if not, thank you all for attending. Appreciate you. This is the last webinar of our spring series. We are looking at Division 4, trying to put together another series in the summer and see what sort of topics. If you have any topics that you would like to be spoken on, CMRTA div4 at gmail.com is the email to post, and we'll definitely take your topic into consideration as we move forward and try to have our future webinars. Once again, thank you, and have a good rest of the week. And if I don't see you or talk to you soon, have a good rest of the next few months. Take care.